Okay, so I'm a nerd, and I've watched a lot of documentaries and movies and other things about this, and so I figured we'd give a brief history of where we came from,
Sure.
and then later on we'll get into some of the things that it's not so much that it sounds fake; it's that it's like when you hear it, you think, "What?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of those things out there.
Okay, so you know. And we're recording.
All right.
So, today I thought we'd talk about nuclear weapons.
Okay. Okay. This you gotta be careful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I have a little bit of a look on my face like, is this going to be a good idea or is this going to be bad? So, what do you know about nuclear weapons? First of all, let me start out with that.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So, I guess just the average knowledge. I know.
That they're weapons and that they're super powerful.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that they're very dangerous, and you don't want to be caught trying to make one.
No, you definitely don't. So, here's the thing. We were actually discussing a different topic, and I was looking into that other topic, and it was going to be about, and maybe we'll do this in the future, but it was going to be kind of about, things that sound fake that aren't.
Yeah.
And I still think that would make a good future video, but
Right.
then we started looking into, or I started looking into, some things that have happened with nuclear weapons.
Right.
And I thought it would just be a good conversation to have just about nuclear weapons. And then maybe we can do if these things are real, but yet sound fake or whatever we're calling it in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm good with that.
Okay, so I'm a nerd, and I've watched a lot of documentaries and movies and other things about this, and so I figured we'd give a brief history of where we came from,
Sure.
and then later on we'll get into some of the things that it's not so much that it sounds fake; it's that it's like when you hear it, you think. What?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of those things out there.
Okay, so the first country to ever have nuclear weapons is the United States.
Okay,
Us.
right.
We developed them. Basically, back in the day, it kind of started out as physicists having conversations about what they thought could be possible. There were some papers written, and some very prominent people started telling their community to maybe start censoring their papers because of some of the things going on in Europe.
Yeah.
And one of those people that helped write a letter was Albert Einstein, and it's not that they didn't want the spread of information. I mean, that's how science works.
Yeah.
It's that they were worried that if they were right, that information would fall into the wrong people's hands.
Right.
We're referring to Hitler here. We did not want him to have it. So then when World War II broke out, there was a great worry that they would have it. And so we started a project here in the United States called the Manhattan Project.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about this before, off camera, and I knew it had something to do with Manhattan, but it turns out it was named because there were scientific offices all over the country that worked on this, but that was like the first area that where it all started. So it was the Manhattan Project.
Okay. Got it.
So the issue is that in the beginning, we and I'm saying we as in humanity, not me as in if I'm smart enough to work in any of this. But mathematically, we could prove that. Well, maybe not even at that point. I don't even know if we could prove mathematically that it would work, but there was a lot of hints that it would. But the issue is that it's like having a puzzle with a whole bunch of pieces missing. You can kind of tell what the picture's supposed to be, but you don't have everything yet.
Okay.
And they started in on research on how to build one of these, and just to see even if it could go critical, if it could get the result that they wanted. And they started playing with very small amounts of radioactive material, and it happened in several places. One of the places it happened in was the University of Chicago.
Okay.
And I believe it was in their squash court or below their squash court. They created what was called a pile reactor, which was just basically a bunch of material to block a reaction and then some material inside of it. So what they wanted to do was whatever was happening in the reaction, they wanted that to bounce back into itself to see if it would start building on itself. And it did.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first parts of the Manhattan Project, because they knew that that there was a possibility that this could happen. Now, a lot of what you hear about the Manhattan Project happens out in New Mexico, in the desert, in a remote location. And that's where they end up. But there was a couple small experiments before then. And then based upon those experiments and the math that had been done, they decided that the U.S. government decided that they were going to move forward with this. And the issue is that now we know that there's a couple different choices for making one of these devices, but back in the day, they thought that uranium might be able to do it. But the issue with uranium is that uranium comes in a couple different forms, and only the rarer form will do what they believe they want it to do.
Okay.
So the issue is that you just don't find that rare form sitting by itself. You find it mixed in with the rest of it. And so they created ways to separate the two materials so that they could end up with the higher grade material that they wanted, that they thought would do the thing that they wanted to do. And they actually built full towns around just the refining of this material. One of them was Oak Ridge. And I was telling you before that they had real funny ways to have the workers explain what they were doing because they couldn't explain what they were doing. It was a secret.
Yeah, you can say I'm like making a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. But you know, other people noticed all these people showing up and they got curious and they were like, what are you guys doing? And they were told all types of hilarious things like, just tell them you put the bolts in the lightning. Or just tell them you put the light in the bulb. Or you put the hole in the donut. It was like a very polite way of saying, mind your own business.
Right.
We're doing something over here. So the original way that they were separating the material was this. They had built these things they called race tracks, which is a way of pushing the material around this like oval shaped thing. And the oval in it would have a porous like membrane in it. And this thing was so precisely created that it only allowed, I believe, the good material to go through, or it only allowed the bad material to go through. Either way, the end result is that on one side was the stuff we didn't want, and on the other side was the stuff that we wanted. But this was not a simple process. This was a process that was very difficult. It took a lot of material, a lot of men, a lot of time, a lot of energy. And, you know, since we were so early on, we didn't know how much we needed.
Yeah.
We didn't know what it would take to go critical. So it's kind of difficult to say how much we need, but we knew we needed more than we had.
Okay.
So after a while, after they started doing the some experiments out in the desert, they think that they came up with a solution. And it turns out that we basically had enough for one.
Okay.
Which would have been bad from
Yeah.
the standpoint that if you've never done this before, you probably want to test it. But if you want to use it in war and you only have one
Yeah.
and you're not 100% sure what it's going to do,
Right.
that would have been... I'm trying to be delicate here because it's bad, but it also what we used them for was bad.
Yeah,
but
right.
yeah. But along the way that they were trying to figure out this material, they found a way to make plutonium,
Okay.
and they were able to make more plutonium than they were uranium. And they also decided that this was going to be good material.
Okay.
So with the plutonium, they actually had enough to create 2 devices. And so they basically created 3 bombs, and the 2 plutonium devices. I guess I first should say that the plutonium device and the 2 plutonium devices and the uranium device operated differently. They were designed differently.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they didn't know what they were doing, and they had 2 theories of how they could do it. They knew that they had to slam the material into itself at a certain level of energy to cause the reaction that they wanted. And the reaction that they wanted was fission, which basically means you have 2 very heavy, like, atoms that slam into each other, and then they break apart, and then they slam into other atoms, and they break apart, and so on and so on and so on, and this reaction happens.
Right. Okay. Got it. So yeah, what's crazy about this so far is that this is still the beginning. Like, this is still in the 1940s.
Yep.
And this is the first attempt to making a large scale bomb.
And these are some of the smartest people on the planet,
Yeah.
and they're kind of looking at each other like, I'm not 100% sure if this is going to work.
Yeah.
Which I hope relays the level of knowledge this took to, or I can't think of a better word. It's just this was not an easy task.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe I need to be delicate at this point, only because, which I think that a lot of people will think about, like, you know, nuclear bombs and realize how much destruction it is. But I guess in the beginning, I think that you have to, as far as like intellectual power goes, you have to like appreciate that part of it, even though this is like a device clearly for mass destruction.
I mean, you know, skipping ahead a little bit, or skipping to a part we never discussed. From these experiments, we did get other things. We got nuclear power. We also got different types of medicine. We understood how things work at an atomic level. We gained a lot of things besides just weapons.
Okay.
But back to the 3 bombs. So they had 2 ideas. One idea was to take a core of this, like almost like a sphere, and crush the sphere so quickly that the atoms would smash into each other and cause division. The other idea was more of like a gun type design where there was a plug at one end and like a projectile, like almost like a bullet at the other end.
Okay.
And the bullet would be fired down a barrel into the plug super fast. So there was the three that were created. The two famous, of course, are Fat Man and Little Boy. And if you've ever seen pictures of them, you can kind of tell which one's which.
Yeah.
Fat Man was kind of roundish, and that was the implosion bomb that crushed the ball.
Right.
And Little Boy was more cylindrical. It looked rounder. It looked like what you'd think a cartoon bomb would look like or something.
Yeah.
And that was the gun type. And then the third bomb didn't really have a name designated to it, but the scientists would refer to it as the gadget. And that was the test. And they detonated it at the Trinity site in New Mexico, which was the very first place on Earth that a nuclear explosion had ever taken place, or man-made nuclear explosion, I should say. And then depending on what version of history you read, because I feel like you think history would be a singular thing, but I feel like as more time goes by, we get more people's sides of it.
Oh, right.
But I remember as a kid, I was being told in our history books that, we dropped the 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right.
And we basically told them that we had the ability to do this as many times as we wanted. And they saw the awesome power that happened once and then twice. And I think if we would have just done it once, they would have thought, you didn't do that. Like, what was that? That like, it just would probably seem unbelievable.
Right. Right.
But the fact that we did it twice and then we bragged that we could do it as many times as we wanted. Now, I believe the truth is that we were out of material and that it would have taken us years to come up with more.
Right.
And in the beginning, we were arguing, or we were not arguing, but we were rushing against time, hoping that Hitler didn't create the bomb. And then after Europe had fallen and Nazi Germany had fallen, I don't think we ever found any evidence that he was trying to do that at all. I think I think at most he was trying to maybe use like a dirty bomb, but not what we did.
Yeah.
So it's I'm sure if you were in the public at the time and you heard about these things, you would think, oh, well, we had to do it before Hitler did it. But now looking back, you realize he wasn't doing it. And then the other flip side of it is, you saw what we did to Japan and what our threats were. But now we know that that we did what we did, and that's all that we could do at the time.
Right. Yeah. Man, it's sometimes it's just surreal to think about, because that was the first time that something like that has ever been done.
Well, and the messed up part is, it's sort of like, I guess the good the best analogy would be opening Pandora's box.
Yeah, exactly.
So we did it, and we proved that it was possible.
Yeah.
Which is a massive step. Because if you think about it, the smartest minds were like, it should be possible. But now we know definitely.
Yeah.
And that is a game changer. In fact, to our surprise, the Soviet Union got it only 5 years after us.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But we were a little shocked by that because of how much effort we had to put into creating it.
Right.
And we thought, when did they do that?
Yeah.
That took a lot of resources to do that.
Right.
And it turned out that in the Manhattan Project, there was a physicist named Klaus Foch, Frunch,
Fudge.
Futch.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him though.
Yeah, we were talking about him before, and he turned out to be a Soviet spy.
Yeah.
So that's how they got it. And then it opened up kind of a new world where we saw all of these possibilities, and we started thinking, you know, when you're thinking about nuclear, there's actually two ends of the spectrum. So the first thing that was created was the atom bomb, which is a fission device, which, like I was saying, it takes heavy particles and atoms and breaks them into two.
Okay.
But the other end of the spectrum is you take a super light element and you slam it into another super light element and you combine them.
Oh, okay.
Now, the division creates quite a bit of energy, which is why there's the awesome destruction power of a nuclear weapon. Yeah. But the fusion part, the other end of the spectrum of fusing two together, creates even more power. And that is referred to as an H-bomb. So the first one's referred to as an A-bomb, and the second one's referred to as an H-bomb. And the first one's referred to also as a nuclear weapon, and the second one's referred to as a thermonuclear weapon.
Right.
So we kind of talked about the two devices, the implosion and the gun type. And it's kind of like having two things in one, because you set off a conventional explosion that causes a nuclear explosion. But the thermonuclear weapon is actually like three weapons, because you have a conventional explosion that causes a fission explosion or chain reaction. And that creates so much pressure and energy that, if it directed in the right way, can cause fission. And then fission creates the massive explosion.
Yes.
I don't mean to get too complicated here, but
I get it.
this is not a simple thing. And the first thing required two things, and the second thing requires three things.
Right.
And you know, with our newfound weapons, or as I think they were thinking of them at the time, like not just weapons, but like tools, we were trying to figure out all that we could do. It was almost like they thought everything was going to be nuclear at some point.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of testing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Sorry. I know just from seeing a lot of pictures, seeing pictures in some like textbooks and then things online. I never got into researching a lot of it, but you would see, just huge, explosion clouds of what it can do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of old like film footage of either tests going off in the desert or out in the ocean, or there was a place called Bikini Atoll. It's part of the Marshall Islands out in the Pacific. And we did a ton of testing there. I want to say there was like 30 some or something like that explosions. And they were all different types. And we were so naive at the time. There was a bunch of, let's call them learning experiences or mishaps, where people maybe weren't using adequate or wearing adequate equipment to protect themselves. There was also some comments about how they thought in the beginning that the locals could stay on a nearby island. There were a lot of things that were done that we now look back at it and think probably should have been done a little differently.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's crazy that they wouldn't think they would have to totally evacuate those people.
Right.
And, yeah.
Well, I don't think they understood it.
Yeah. Yeah, true. I mean, I guess once again, it's still in the very beginning, so it's still hard to like wrap your mind around it, because I think sometimes you think like with something that powerful,
Right.
it would have taken like, I don't know, longer. And even though it was years kind of to develop, that it would have, I don't know.
Well, they were still in the testing phase,
Yeah.
and they had all of these like ambitions. They thought that that conventional weapons would just go away, and that everything would be nuclear now that we've unlocked this secret.
Yeah.
And they were talking about like artillery shells, like those great big shells that they shoot out of like howitzers and stuff, or the tank rounds or whatever. They thought all of those would be nuclear.
Oh, man.
They actually created this small nuclear device called the Davy Crockett.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen this thing?
Yeah.
It looks almost like one of those rocket, like shoulder mounted things, but it's slightly bigger.
Yeah.
And when it goes off, it's equivalent to 20 tons of TNT.
Yeah, that's insane.
I mean, imagine like a dump truck
Yeah.
full of TNT. And this is something that just like a handful of guys can just hump out into the field, set up, let off the chain.
Yeah. And it's a nuclear bomb that, that's insane.
But they didn't necessarily know. They knew the awesome power. They didn't fully understand all of the devastation from radiation. They were figuring things out. They noticed during tests that there was a bunch of like electropneumatic or electric. Now I'm saying this wrong. Electrical disturbance.
Yeah.
And one of the tests that they were running ran underneath the name of Operation Fishbowl, which basically they nuked the atmosphere.
Oh my goodness.
They knew that when they would set one of these off, that it would cause disturbances on their radios and other electronics.
Yeah.
And they knew some phenomenon like the Northern Lights and things like that.
Yeah.
And they knew that high enough up that this almost, I don't know what they were hoping for, like an electropneumatic or an electrical storm or something, or but they would set them up and they were hoping that it would almost devastate another part of the world.
That's insane. That is just insane. You know, when early on, I might have mentioned before, you know, that I saw a little documentary about about Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
And that before they dropped the bomb, one of their concerns were that it could set the atmosphere on fire.
They really didn't know.
Yeah. And even though I understand that, like, that this fishbowl, Operation Fishbowl, was after that, but still, I mean, to go ahead and like do that, I don't know. That's just insane because
there were a bunch of things, like they thought that the flash would be so bright that they'd get a suntan from it.
Yeah.
And certain people were wearing welder's glasses, and I mean, it is a bright flash, but they didn't know. The Operation Fishbowl taught us things. I don't think it taught us a lot of useful things. They were hoping to use it as a way to like kind of electronically blind the enemy, you know, to maybe knock out their communications or whatever. But it wreaked havoc in many places, many more than just the site they did it at and the intended destruction site.
Yeah.
So they stopped, but there were tons of crazy ideas. This was also right around the time that the space race was going on, and they we were being embarrassed by the Soviet Union to some degree. They had the first man in space. They had the first object in space. They had the first animal in space.
Right.
They had a lot of things. And so one of the things that we were discussing was maybe nuking the moon.
Yeah.
And the point behind that was just more or less like a propaganda tool to be like, look what we could do. And it wasn't just us. The Soviet Union was talking about that.
Yeah, that's insane. Like, why nuke the moon?
Yeah, and it was mostly just so that we could look up and see the flash to go, look, we did that.
Yeah. Look, some pretty lights. Look at that.
But there's a lot of very bad side effects to doing that.
Yeah.
And they looked at those and they understood some of them and they said, maybe this isn't the best idea.
Yeah.
And we decided, you know what? It would be more impressive if we just put men on the moon.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we did that.
That was a better idea.
I think it was too. Yeah. But they didn't know what they could do with these things. They just thought it was like the newest thing and everything would be this way.
Yeah.
I mean, I even remember seeing like old school science stuff where they were talking about the future, how your car may run off of nuclear and things like that. They had no idea. One of the things they were thinking about with the explosive part of nuclear energy is they were actually thinking about civil works projects.
Okay.
You know, we worked for, what was it, like 10 years to make the Panama Canal.
Mm-hmm.
There was tons of rock moved.
Yeah.
There was tons of earth moved. It took forever. We had to engineer these massive earth movers.
Yeah. Oh, so nuking it would have been a better idea?
There were people that were like, why not nuke it? And I'm glad that we didn't do that.
Yeah, honestly.
There's a huge part of global commerce that goes through the Panama Canal, and we don't need it all contaminated with radiation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to mention the locals and I mean, the problems are on problems, you know?
Right.
But yeah, we talked about it, but we didn't do it.
Yeah. Well, good.
Well, the issue is that it's they're so powerful. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that the only time that the world actually uses them is what we've already done.
Yeah.
I mean, someone was going to do it. Well, I don't know if that's a good argument to be had, but but the point is that we did, and I hope it's the last time.
Yeah, for sure.
But the deal is that I believe most people understand the awesome power behind it. I think we do, and I think the Soviet Union did, now Russia. I hope they don't use them, but
yeah, for sure.
with today's climate and everything, with the Ukraine war, I hope nothing like that happens. Yeah. But what we've got between us and them, and I'm saying us and them is us and Russia, is we have what we refer to here in the United States as the nuclear triad. Mm-hmm. So it's the three basically deployments of weapons. Mm-hmm. They're land-based, air-based, and sea-based. And they take the form of intercontinental ballistic missiles, so large missiles capable of entering space. Mm-hmm. And they can basically hit anywhere on the planet. Mm-hmm. But then there are also weapons that can go onto airplanes, into bombers that can be dropped. Right. And then there are basically cruise missiles and intercontinental missiles that can be launched from submarines. Mm-hmm. And so we have that deployment. Russia has that deployment. And we both understand that it's so spread out, especially with the submarines, you don't know where they are. Mm-hmm. Even missing one could be massively devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully, we never get to that point. Because, just having to think about that statement, like, that we have to know where everything is so it doesn't come back on us type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, what were they call? They would call it MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction.
Yeah. The perfect acronym.
Yeah. I mean, some of these larger subs, so basically subs are in two different categories. There's attack subs, which are smaller, and they're more like hunter killers. They're faster, they're smaller, but they don't carry like intercontinental
Yeah.
weapons. The big rockets, and then there are kind of nicknamed boomer subs,
Yeah.
which are the large ICBM subs.
Okay.
I'm not sure how many missiles they can carry. I saw that some of ours can carry up to 16, and then each missile could have up to 3 warheads apiece.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's
And I believe that the warheads can be independently guided. So once they go up into the atmosphere, when they come down, they can spread out.
yeah.
So, I mean, right there, what is that? 16 times 3, you're talking 48 warheads.
Yeah.
I mean, even if one side attacked the other side and they just missed one sub, that is
Yeah.
a massive amount of destruction.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Nobody wants to get there.
No, I mean, during the Cold War, we would do insane things like we had an operation called Operation Chrome Dome.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit before.
Yeah. I'm familiar with that. So a lot of U.S. planes would be carrying like armed, planes armed with nuclear bombs would kind of be on standby, like, circling like the U.S.
Standby, but in the air.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And just in case there's an attack, we're close by and we can retaliate type of thing.
And that kind of goes into the whole, even if you want to get us, you got to find all of it.
Right.
Like, even if you knew where all the ground-based missiles were and somehow you knew where the subs were, did you know where every airplane was?
Yeah,
I mean, just missing one piece of the puzzle, it could be devastating.
Yeah. And, I'm surprised that that it hasn't been more devastating as it is, because with that Operation Chrome Dome, there were so many accidents
Yes.
that did not end up in disaster.
Yeah, and this is what we were. This is some of the things that I was thinking about for the other podcast.
Yeah.
It sounds so screwed up. It sounds almost fake, but it really happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
These incidences are called broken arrows.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is so messed up that we have a term for this.
Yeah.
I mean, does it happen that often? Well, we looked it up.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
It's happened, what, 30?
Yeah, at least 32 times.
32 times.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is that you mentioned there's that movie Broken Arrow.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it. I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. But I didn't realize it was kind of based on that.
Yeah,
Like
it's basically John Travolta's character steals some nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And then who was the other guy in it?
Oh, Nicolas Cage?
Was it Nicolas Cage, or was it? Now I'm starting to think that it was
I don't know.
Emilio
Estevez?
Yeah. Listen here.
I don't know. Or
Broken Arrow.
yeah. And so with the
Christian Slater.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Nice. Okay, yeah, I'm going to have to I think I'm going to have to check it out. Even though I know it's an older movie, it's fine. I'm going to have to see what it's all about. Actually, sorry, I want to backtrack for a second.
Sure.
There's another movie, The Hunt for the Red October.
Yeah.
I think that's probably about like a nuclear submarine that was
Wait, have you never seen it?
I've never seen that
Oh,
either.
that's a really good movie.
Yeah, okay.
It's we're getting off track a little bit, but it's about one of the ways that subs can detect other subs is the noise they make.
Yeah.
And the Red October is a Russian submarine that's completely silent. They're using an experimental drive.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And they got to find it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's a problem.
Right.
I won't ruin the movie.
Okay. Nice. Okay, so back to like the Broken Arrow incidents.
Yeah.
So what's crazy about it is that it was like from 1950 to like the 80s, I believe, that incidents happened. Where there were armed military planes that had an accident. Somehow they crashed. And like I said, we're lucky that there were no other nuclear explosions. I don't know how, after 32 incidents, and it ranges. It ranges,
Yes, none of them went critical.
right.
Some of them exploded, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we were talking in the beginning, there's a conventional, like explosive in there.
Yeah.
And then there's the material, the nuclear material.
Yeah.
None of the nuclear material went off, but some of it got thrown around.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just insane. Because you would think that something like that maybe would have been thought about, or maybe some foresight into accidents like that, or maybe even after maybe the 5th or 10th one, maybe something would have changed. Because these accidents range from planes colliding into each other, or crashing into a mountain, or even something happening with the plane itself, like catching on fire, or some type of malfunction, that causes the plane to crash, or
Right.
And sometimes the whole crew is lost.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we're lucky none of the weapons went
yeah.
critical, because then a lot of people would have been lost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, way more than, and it's just almost like a miracle that nothing like that has happened, because, that's just, I don't know, 1 in a million odds that all those crashes and nothing went critical. So there was one that actually happened in the U.S. In North Carolina, where there was 2 bombs on the plane, and one of them, I think it was all the stages of the bomb, except one.
Yeah, we were talking about this. So 2 bombs fell, and one of these devices can't just go off. There's safety. Well, there's steps built into it,
Right.
to try to stop a full explosion, and they basically have to go through one step to the next step to the next step. They're all sequential, and it got to the point where it deployed its parachute, and so it was one step away from going.
Yeah.
And it basically landed. There's a picture of it. I'll put it up on the screen.
Yeah.
But there is. It landed next to a tree.
Yep. Yeah. I think the parachute got caught in the branches.
Yeah, and it was just sitting there next to a tree, and this thing is huge.
Yeah.
I think it's 3 feet wide, and it doesn't say it here, but I wanted to say it was was it 15 feet long or something? But the messed up part is what happened to the other bomb. It did not go through any of its stages, so it never deployed its parachute.
Yeah.
And they estimate that it was moving about 700 miles per hour when it hit the ground.
Yeah.
And sort of like I was talking about before with a thermonuclear device, there's basically the conventional explosives, then there is the fission device, and then there's the fusion device, and they call that I think it's called the core and the pit, and the core, most of the core was found. I think they worked for 8 days trying to find it, but the pit wasn't found. So they removed most of the thing that hit the ground. But since the pit wasn't found, they actually the federal government had to purchase that part of land.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
And then they put a fence around it, and they were basically you can't go here.
Yeah.
It's not that big a piece of land, but
Right. Yeah. Because the area is radioactive, or what?
yeah, and if let's say somebody didn't know what was down there and decided to dig it up or drill a well or do something, either way, the government has said not right here.
Yeah. Okay. So I know you said that there's stages to it, so it can't just go off. But in an instance where like where this, the bomb's like down in the ground, is there anything stopping it from like going off, or like it still has to go through stages, or it can't just like be triggered and go off?
Well, it's been ripped apart, so only the pit is missing. So that is how do I call this? Refined material. But it on its own can't just explode or anything like that. It like I was saying before, like it requires a very precise primary explosion to cause the secondary part of the explosion. Even when they were doing this during the Manhattan Project out in the desert, they were unsure if they were going to be able to achieve a perfect enough explosion to create this domino effect. But the radiation is still very deadly.
Oh yeah. So because with the term broken arrow, there are other terms that are used, as for nuclear warnings type of thing, and one of them is nuke flash.
I've never heard of that one.
So that one is a warning if there was a detonation of a nuclear device that could prompt like other worldwide devices. Like if it was an accidental detonation.
I see what you're saying.
So the reason I was asking is because if there's a chance that even though we've had all these broken arrow instances where some of the bombs were not recovered, or if there was a chance that there could be an accidental detonation, and then that could prompt,
Absolutely. I mean, back to the whole mutually assured destruction. It kind of requires everyone to be ready all the time, and you have to make a very dangerous decision very quickly. And if even one went off by, let's say, an accident, if someone else deemed that as a threat, it could cause one person does it, the next person, and the domino effect. Yeah, that's messed up. That's called a nuke flash?
Yeah, nuke flash.
What was the other one you were saying before?
There's one that's hold on, because there are a couple of them that are like there's one like empty quiver that they try to like disguise these things, but that's basically like if there was a nuclear weapon that was like lost or stolen, then that would be the code for that.
I thought Broken Arrow was lost.
No, Broken Arrow is like an accident with a nuclear device.
Oh, I thought it was or lost. Okay. But didn't you say something like bent spear? Or something?
There's a bent spear, which this one says it refers to incidents involving nuclear weapons, warheads, or components, or vehicles transporting materials that are of significant interest. But they're not categorized as like, highly important, I guess.
Well, we were talking about how the North Carolina incident, we've also dropped them on our friends, not just ourselves. We dropped one in Spain back in 66, and it looked like, I've got the Wikipedia page up here. It's a B-52 is getting refueled by a KC-135 tanker, and they collided during refueling. And the B-52 was carrying nuclear weapons, and we were over Spain, and we dropped them on Spain, and there was a massive cleanup. And the weapons were destroyed, not detonated, but they were ripped apart by this accident, and they spread radioactive material. In fact, we were looking at this before, and it seems like even to this day, Spain is saying
Oh yeah.
the area is contaminated.
Yeah. Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah, well, we were talking about, what you call it, nuke flash. But we were also talking about what would happen if two large countries exchanged, especially like us and Russia. And, I believe the official reports is that like hundreds of millions would die. But I've also heard things about radiation and nuclear fallout and contaminating the air, that it's very likely that the northern hemisphere of our planet would just be not a great place for us anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to get too dark, but like, and if there were something that happened like that, because personally, I mean, like I said, I don't want to be too dark, too grim, but I don't think I would be looking to live in a post-apocalyptic type world.
No, it wouldn't be good. How do I say this? I would like to say that it's not as bad as it was. I think a lot of the countries that have them, and I'm saying a lot, not all, understand the awesome power. I mean, it was, wasn't it Colin Powell that was talking about how nuclear weapons are basically useless?
Yeah.
Because it's like,
It's
like, what's it called? A Mexican standoff?
Yeah.
If we're all just pointing our guns at each other, and if anyone does anything, so nobody wants to do anything.
Yeah. Because, I mean, once it's used, then everyone's using them, and, there's no good end in there.
Yeah, hopefully we never get to that point.
Yeah.
He was saying, I was looking over this this article written about him. He was saying when he became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in '89, that he was in charge of 28,000 devices.
Oh, dang.
But because of treaties and disarmament deals and things like that, we're actually down somewhere in the neighborhood of around 5,500 devices now, which is better. Russia has more, and they've always had more. They're right around 6,000. Russia has made some of the largest bombs in the world. We were kind of talking about the largest bombs during testing, and you pulled up the Tsar's Bomba.
Oh, yeah, which was ridiculous because it was showing a graphic of it compared to like next to other explosions. But then I think one of the most noticeable things was there was a plane in this graphic. Most commercial planes fly at 30,000 feet.
Yeah,
and it towers.
The explosion was so high that the mushroom cloud reached the stratosphere. It was a 50 megaton explosion. I've seen reports saying that they were originally thinking about doing 100 megaton. This device had a parachute on it to slow its descent, to allow the plane to get farther away, and the plane that dropped it almost didn't escape. It was massive. So the fact that they have more and they're bigger, I also just kind of want to say the raw destructive power of them, it almost doesn't matter. Because the number we have and the number they have is more than enough to just devastate everything.
Right.
So if someone has a couple more or they're slightly bigger, ours are more accurate. But it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. The messed up part is that though we're right around 5,500, and they're right around 6,000. The next one on the list is China, who I believe has been building their stockpile up and not going down like we are, they're estimated to be right around 400. So we still have a lot more.
Right.
But I still wouldn't. That doesn't mean that I think that we are superior over another nuclear capable country, because the exchange could be terrible.
Right. Exactly. It's still just as bad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I don't know. It's scary at times to think about because, you know, if it ever comes to that point, we know that there's not going to be anything good coming out of that. And the other thing is, you know, kind of what would prompt another nation to like get rid of their nukes, you know?
Yeah, you know, now that Pandora's box has been opened, I'm not sure that we're ever going to see a world without them. But I do like situations where we encourage other countries not to get into them. You know, we recently pulled out of the Iran deal. There was a lot of comments about how it wasn't a good deal. I don't think I'm necessarily qualified to talk about any of this really, but I'm not going to comment on whether that was a good deal or not. But one of the things that it was doing was it was keeping their material below certain limits, and it was allowing inspectors from the United Nations to come in and make sure that they were holding up their end. And frankly, I would like to see more of that and less of people saying, look what we just got.
Yeah, right.
We've had a couple morbid conversations. I mean, this wasn't as morbid as the last one we had. But, you know, I was looking into the other thing that we may still talk about. And I saw these broken arrow incidences, and I saw the two countries, the United States and the Soviet Union, talking about nuking the moon. And I just thought, these are all ridiculous things that if somebody just said to me, hey, did you know that the United States dropped nuclear weapons on itself?
Yeah.
I would be like, what?
Yeah.
And then if they were like, hey, did you know that both the Soviet Union and the United States were thinking about nuking the moon? I would be like, come on.
Yeah. You're joking.
Yeah, but I also find the entire thing from the beginning of the Manhattan Project, or even before that, when there was just scientists doing math, physicists doing math, talking about things, interesting. And we did learn a lot more than just how to make massive explosions. At the same time, we've kind of opened a door that we can no longer close.
Correct. A little depressing note to end that on.
Yeah, sorry about that. If this is the kind of stuff you guys want us to talk about, because this is kind of the things, some of the things that at least we're interested in, let us know in the comments. We're kind of guessing still at this stage in what we should and shouldn't talk about.
Yeah.
Who knows? This could be a huge failure. If this has ticked you off, that we decided to talk about this, let us know. Or if this is something you're interested in and you'd like to hear more of it, please let us know.
Yeah, just drop a note right in the comments.
All right. Well, that's all I got for today.
All right. See you next time.
I'll talk to you later.